Hey YouTube, I'm Ali. Welcome to Gaming Indoors, a channel dedicated to helping you design and explore all kinds of games, mostly indoors. Today, this video is a start. It's a journey. It's the start of actually building our own game. And I'm going to do that live on air, so to speak, through these videos. But I'm going to be doing it in partnership with you and your suggestions. Now, this video is going to be split into two halves. The first bit is all about the game idea, the origin of the game. It's going to give us our boundary, and I'm going to use your feedback around mechanics, theme, and player experience to help shape that. Once we've got that sorted, we're going to move on to the first of 10 questions. So this video is the first of the 10 questions I need to ask myself about building a game. And that is around what the game structure and the player interaction is actually going to look like. First off, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that's participated in the comments below and helped shape some of the ideas I'm about to explore. I really do appreciate it. One of the desires in building this channel was to help start an engagement, a conversation process between those people that have been there and done it and those people that are thinking of making board games for the first time, and really helping the transfer of knowledge to occur. You guys are just full of good ideas, and I've listed a few of them which we'll go through in this section now. Now, just before we kick off on those three different topics, I want to cover a couple of comments that were raised about the overall process we're about to engage in. The first is from Ralph King, and he mentions about the fact that if someone puts up an idea and I don't go with that idea, are they going to lose interest? And that's probable and possible, but that's not the intention. The whole point of this is to demonstrate there are lots of different ways of interpreting a single task. There are lots of ways we could create the game of Snakes and Ladders. What I want you guys to do is really enjoy the process and follow the process of building a game which I totally understand may not end up being fun to play at all. This is almost a proof of concept of building a game through the channel with a collective of ideas. Not every idea is going to get included. It doesn't mean that those ideas aren't worthwhile, and it also doesn't mean that your input is not needed. Even if your idea is not progressed, please still do continue to participate, because every little bit's going to help and shape our eventual product. Now, the other comment was raised by Erinus, I'm going to say. I probably pronounced that wrong. And he talked about the fact that if we redesign Snakes and Ladders, is it in fact still Snakes and Ladders? If you add, as he puts in his comment, dice to chess, then it's no longer a chess. You're absolutely right. The whole point of starting the Snakes and Ladders was merely to find a point of inspiration, to set something in everyone's mind that they could all relate to and understand as a starting point, as a jumping off point for further ideas. So you are absolutely right. We are very probably going to completely transform what we understand Snakes and Ladders to be at the moment into something new. And again, that's kind of part of the point. Okay, with those things covered, let's look at our first of three things for the game idea, which is the mechanics. When I think of mechanics, there are a ton of things that come to mind. Firstly, I obviously think of Snakes and Ladders as a roll and move, and I know that's one thing I don't want to have in its current incarnation. There may well be some changes we can make to roll and move if we wanted to include it. What went through my head when I saw Eric's suggestion of worker placement was the idea of flipping Snakes and Ladders completely around, so that we were almost like the controller of the game, and we were placing down, as players, we're placing down snakes or ladders in strategic places each round to try to trap or assist players who we never got to see. So we were almost like filling a dungeon with monsters in one of those dungeon crawl games that I forget the name of now, shame on me. But the point is, it immediately sparked a completely different thought process, a different way of looking at Snakes and Ladders, which I absolutely loved. Similarly, when I saw Patton's suggestion of legacy, I love that idea. The ability to change the board really did appeal to me. It opened up avenues of possibility. The point I'm trying to get across here is, for me, when I started thinking of mechanics, what they actually helped me shape were the possibilities and directions that this game could go in. Now for theme, we've already got a base platform of Snakes and Ladders, a family fun game where you're racing to get ahead of each other. Bo's suggestion of Snakes and Ladders Descent into Hell, well, that immediately gave me a moody setting. It made me feel as if this game could become quite dark, quite atmospheric, and that something tense was happening. Now Lazy Kabis, I really am terrible with names, sorry, came up with a great suggestion of looking back at the origins of Snakes and Ladders and perhaps embracing the nature of sin and virtue as part of a game, so that actually you reimagine Snakes and Ladders back to its original form, and that the game really could potentially have a moral code behind it. Lewis, I love your suggestion of taking this in a completely different direction and possibly including time travel as a means of going forward or back through reality, I guess. Again, a great way of interpreting the theme in a completely different way. And finally, I saw Lanek's suggestion, which I must admit probably appealed to me the most, and that was setting Snakes and Ladders in some sort of temple or some sort of area where snakes caused you to slow down and you had escape mechanisms through ladders. I think you talked about an inverted temple, but the general setting really did help. So where does this lead me then? Well, I think for theme, I'm going to stick with the idea of the traditional sense of Snakes and Ladders. The game probably is going to have, in a very real sense, some snakes and some sort of ladders in there. I think I'm probably going to stick with a landscape or an island or a temple or some structure like that. I think anything more esoteric probably isn't going to work for me in this particular instance. In terms of mechanics, I think there is plenty of exploration still to be made here. I'm probably not going to commit to anything, except that I probably want to use tried and tested mechanics, and I probably won't reinvent the wheel here. I suspect I want this game to be a gateway game, and probably anything too complex might confuse, and so I probably want to leave it out. I'm not sure that's right. I might come back to that. In terms of player experience, I think the theme here is I do want to keep this to be a family game, something akin to maybe Catan, some level of strategy, but lots of communication. Maybe the mechanics of trading, I think was mentioned previously in one of my comments as well, I think will come about. So there is some engagement here. I don't want this to be a game where you're sitting in silence thinking of deep strategy. Something that's light, something that's probably going to be based around the landscape and will use mechanics that have been tried and tested. That is my game idea. Now, let's move to the meat of this video, and that is the first part of understanding what kind of player interactions I'm going to have and what kind of game structure this is actually going to take. But just before we continue, I'm going to take a quick break to say, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. It really helps the channel out. If you've already subscribed, please make sure you do hit that like button, especially if you do actually like the content. If you don't, hey, why don't you put a comment below and explain why, and I'll do my best to adjust and address it. I do my best to try to answer all the comments that are put in my channel. Anyway, let's move on. Now, for a lot of people, defining the way players interact and the structure of the game is actually another way of saying game genre. Snakes and Ladders in its current incarnation actually forms the first of these, which is a competitive game. So Snakes and Ladders, very much a competitive game. Now, competitive games themselves have three variations. Snakes and Ladders has no conflict at all. That means you are acting on your own as a player and completely independent of every other person. There's no way you influence them and they can't influence you. No conflict. But a lack of conflict also means lack of tension. And I kind of like games with tension because tension usually means excitement. That's where conflict comes in. Now, there are two forms of conflict. We can either have direct conflict or indirect conflict. Direct conflict is where you target an individual player and you go after him. You stop them from progressing in the game or hinder them in some way. Non-direct conflict is where you put something down onto the board, for example, or you play cards in such a way that you inhibit the progress of everyone generally, but you might actually benefit yourself. You're not targeting anyone, you're just generally doing something to screw with everyone else. Now, in the world of Snakes and Ladders, I think we're blessed because we've got an amazing theme to call upon. Of course, we can put down pits full of snakes, or we can call upon the serpent god to have serpents arrive. Or maybe it's the priests from the serpent god in our temple that turn up and start attacking. Or we can use ladders, or rope ladders, or a rope bridge, or maybe a helicopter turns up and throws us a means of rising up or getting out of wherever we are. I think we could translate those into direct or indirect conflict tools. So I think there are some really good options for adding some conflict into a competitive version of this game, should we choose to do that. How a game is won is also very key to the structure of the game, and so far we've been talking about a race mechanic to have one winner or a team of people win. But there's also the reverse of that, and that is to say you don't win a game, but rather you lose it. Jenga is a classic example of a single player loser game where no one actually wins the game, you can only lose it. What this makes me think of in terms of a Snakes and Ladders game is more of a kind of push your luck scenario. So maybe we're exploring the temple rather than trying to escape for it. And we do something in our game where at each turn we're taking more and more chances in trying to maybe grab the gold from the temple, or find that rare snake, or wake up the sleeping snake gods that we're trying to, for some bizarre reason, summon. The point is, each turn we increase our risk of actually losing. I think that could be quite an exciting dynamic to explore. Now, of course, we don't have to choose a competitive route at all. Another genre of game is to have a cooperative game, either fully cooperative or semi-cooperative. Fully cooperative games are where we all act together as a team, yet another genre of game, but we all act together as a team trying to beat the game itself. Semi-cooperative is exactly the same, but here you also have mechanisms to identify one player as the overall winner. Now, cooperative games often have a level of artificial intelligence built into them. It's usually quite simple. In our case, if we are in fact trapped as a team all on a desert island in a snake god's temple that we're trying to escape from, maybe that artificial intelligence could simply be a deck of cards that reveal certain events that happen to us and hinder us in some way. Maybe priests arrive, or the serpent god wakes up, or something. Now, also sneaking around in the cooperative world is the Traitor genre of game. Traitors are basically players who are working secretly against everyone else. This adds an amazing level of tension into a game, and I find traitor mechanics really fun. Imagine if you were that we were all working together to get out of the serpent temple or find the hidden treasure, all working together. Only one or more of us aren't, because in reality we are priests working for the great snake god Fred, and we're actually there to protect the temple rather than allow people to come and sacrilegiously ruin it. I'm going off on one here, but think of the possibilities. I think having a traitor mechanic could be a good idea. Then again, not everyone's a fan of traitor mechanics. They want a nice, simple, clean game where you know who exactly you're playing and dealing with. Another thing that perhaps we should consider, I think, though. Now, like I said, I don't normally like cooperative games, but I do think the theme of Snakes and Ladders, especially if we're all trapped in a temple that we're trying to escape from, or an island filled with snakes and or ladders that we're trying to get out of, I think that could be quite exciting as a cooperative game. Now, I mentioned team as being a genre of game too, but there's also the opposite of that, I guess, which is solo play as a genre of game. These are games designed to be played by one individual. Very often, games that are played competitively or cooperatively also have a solo mode. Do we want a solo mode for our game? Well, I'm not so sure to begin with. I think right now I want to embrace that kind of family feeling of having 4 players ideally, all playing together. Maybe later on we could introduce a solo mode, but right now let's keep it at that kind of 4-player level, I think. Now, once again, so far we've been talking about a game that I think sits on its own. We play the game, we leave the game ends, hooray, done. But there is a different kind of game, which is a campaign game, a game designed to be played continuously over and over again over a longer period of time, each time developing the game further and further. That gave rise, I believe, to two different genres that fit really well into this idea of a campaign. The first is legacy and the second is scenario-based genres of games. Now, legacy games are games where each time you play the game, you physically change the components you're playing with. You may remove them, tear them up, scratch something off the board. There's a ton of things you could do which physically changes the game every time you play. Scenario-based games are games where the mechanics of the games are fundamentally the same, but the actual gameplay is different each time. You have scenarios that you reenact and play through. Not reenact, but play through. Chronicles of Crime is a great example of that, or so is, of course, Frosthaven and Gloomhaven. Now for us, I don't know whether I want to go down this route either. I think this could be quite involved and quite difficult to manage as an experiment over YouTube. I really do want to keep with that kind of boundary that I gave myself on the game idea of something that's quick to play and finishes within one session, which campaign games like scenario-based games or legacy games kind of don't. Now, you could argue you can have a legacy game or a campaign game that fits within 1 hour or so, but I'm not really convinced. So, although they exist and they are choices we could take, I'm going to step back from this as well. So where does that leave us? Well, we've got a couple of options here. I think having a competitive game where we're all working against each other to win something is a good option. But then I also think a cooperative game is pretty decent too. Do we want to include a traitor mechanic into our game and have a traitor lurking around with our cooperative game? Maybe, maybe not. And what about solo losing games? Games where we're trying to do something and it's not about winning, it's actually just about not losing. I think I have 4, more or less, options that I'm going to offer up. What do you think we should do? Which direction could we go in with this game? I'm going to put it into a vote after this video. All you need to do is make sure you subscribe and then hit the option that most appeals to you. Whatever option gets the highest number of votes, well, that's going to be our starting point for the next installment of this game development series. Kind of excited, but also very, very nervous. Until next time, guys, take care. Oh, please do continue giving me your feedback. I absolutely love the ideas we're seeing. What do you think of what we've come up with so far? Does it help? Have I given you anything that you can use in your own games? I hope so. And if not, tell me what I'm missing and I'll see if I can go research it and bring it back to you in some hopeful and entertaining way. Bye now.